Now I am thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker. Kerry Hannon is a leading expert and strategist on work and jobs, entrepreneurship, personal finance, and retirement. She is the author of more than a dozen books, including Great Pajama Jobs, Your Complete Guide to Working from Home, Never Too Old to Get Rich, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Starting a Business Midlife, Great Jobs for Everyone 50 Plus, and Money Confidence. Kerry is a frequent keynote speaker and TV and radio commentator. She's also an expert columnist and regular contributor to the New York Times, MarketWatch, Forbes, and PBS Next Avenue. So Kerry, it is great to have you with us.
Oh, Catherine, I love being here. Thank you. And I am moving to Colorado. I mean, it is amazing what everyone is doing out there. I mean, just listening to the presentations this morning, I'm so excited to hear all the different things that we've heard about the apprenticeships and, the focus on lifelong learning and coaching. I mean, this is exactly what needs to be happening.
Oh, it sure is. And for our audience, we probably should let them know we did not connect beforehand regarding our wardrobes. Uh, we've been on the phone many times. Your hair has grown long and mine has been cut short. When I ask you questions, I'm going to call you Kerry. So our audience does not confuse us. And for our audience, Kerry and I in our planning, we thought it might be kind of fun to just have a lively, spirited keynote conversation. And so, Kerry, if you're up for that, I've got a long list of questions for you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, go for it.
Okay, so let's start out with the really big question. You have, over the years, you have interviewed hundreds of individuals and employers. And one of the things that I often see in your work, in your writing, in your news stories, is that employers who recognize and leverage the talents of older workers are better prepared for the future of work and the future of the workplace, and that the wisest employers know in their hiring practices it's not all about age. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, that's the thing. It is not about age, and that's sort of the thing that it's such a stumbling block for people. And it's kind of the one thing that when we're thinking about diversity in the workplace, it kind of gets pushed to the back of the line. It's not something that's right up there for so many reasons. And Catherine, I think one of them is a fear. Maybe employers don't want to bring it to the surface with their current employees who are getting older because they risk this fear of age discrimination lawsuits or something. And older workers often are afraid to raise their hand because they don't want to draw attention to themselves, or they're fearful of spending the time and taking the risk and the financial cost of learning new things and updating their skills. So there's this kind of disconnect in the dance there. And I do think the fact is it is a cultural wake-up call that, in fact, yes, the workplace is getting older. There's no denying this. This is what's going forward, and it's global. It's really something that is, and it is today, the companies who are really nimble are going to focus on this today and say, okay, this isn't just solving problems with getting skilled workers today and retaining our older workers and attracting them, but generations down the line, this is the future. As we're seeing these, as we heard earlier this morning, these big demographic shifts. So I think employers who really are hip to this idea that older workers bring an enormous amount of value to their workplace are the ones that are going to be, ready to move ahead with the future of work.
Fantastic. So let me ask you. So a lot of employers, what we've seen in our research is for a lot of employers, it's just not even yet on their radar screen. This tremendous opportunity to tap into the expertise of an older workforce. In your experience, what are the top 5 benefits to employers for embracing older workers and a multi-generational workforce?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could go on this for a long time, Catherine, but let's start with just a couple of highlights. I mean, this is a huge opportunity. It's a win for the employer, for the economy, and for the worker. And this is why. if you, number one, it's a cost saver, right? You might say, oh, wait, what are you talking about? There's this fear that having somebody who's more experienced, they're going to be too expensive and you can't afford them. They're going to want these high salaries, or they're expensive for their health insurance. But in fact, an older worker, an experienced worker, tends to be more loyal. They're not into jumping around jobs. They're not looking for that next rung up the ladder, typically. Now, believe me, I'm talking a little bit in generalizations, but they tend to be more loyal. They tend to be focused on the organization. They tend to be more collegiate. At this point in their careers, the ego is not front and center. They love working with teams, with younger people, this multi-generational workforce, and we can talk about this more, is really the key to productivity and creativity and moving forward with great new ideas, is the blending of these two generations or multiple generations. They also tend to be, they come with the communication skills. They've been at this for a long time. It's not all emails and texting, but it's actually verbal and written communication skills that are critical. They also, I find that older workers have leadership skills. They're managers. They've seen what has happened in the past. I mean, I often say to employers, think of hiring an older worker as an insurance policy against rough economic times ahead, because they've weathered a lot of different cycles. They know how to kind of get through things. They can be a ballast in a workplace. And also, and I'm way beyond the number. I want to say with the multi-gen, it's also productivity. Studies have shown when you put the different generations together, they're more productive. It really is a great combination. So I think we're seeing a lot of these different things. They have great decision-making skills, mojo, they have confidence. They're not, sort of teach me. They want to learn, but they come with a certain sense of, yeah, I've got this. I can start the job right now. I can hit the ground running. And I'm sure you can add a few.
Oh, indeed. Yes, you are singing to the choir. And one of the things that we're societally, we're still trying to address ageism, and it can be so much more difficult for older job seekers. And in your view, from a myth busting perspective, what are some misperceptions about older workers that we need to myth bust and just retire?
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm going to preface this as well as saying, some workers might have these issues, but in general, I would say that, employers are concerned that that the employee's not up for the job, that they don't have the stamina, that they are taking a position maybe as just a holding position until they actually want to retire. So they're not in it for the long haul. That they're not up to speed with technology, which is completely untrue. There's no study I've seen that has shown that an older worker cannot have as sharp technologically, mentally and technologically as a younger cohort. It may take a little time to learn some new things, but they're definitely not behind the curve here, especially after the pandemic. We know that. They worry that they're not going to play well with the other kids, that they're not going to be happy. And what I mean by that is reporting to a younger boss, that there might be some tension and some resentment about that sort of thing. And that, as I alluded to before, that you're too expensive, that the older worker has salary demands that are out of reach. And I think those are some of the key elements that sort of make people say, I'd rather start with somebody who I can get that's less expensive, that I can train quickly to hit the ground running. So that's really some of the main sort of stumbling blocks.
Okay, and you touched on something that I want to delve a little bit further into, and it's a real life situation. In fact, somebody approached me not that long ago, an individual in his 50s, who said, Catherine, my boss is 24. and as we're in a multi-generational workforce, 4, even 5 generations, we're going to see more and more situations where an older individual is reporting to somebody who's much younger than they are. And I know you were on the Dr. Phil show talking about this. But what are your tips for employers, managers, as well as team members in being successful in this new reality?
Catherine, that is such a great question because truthfully, I'm experiencing it myself all the time, and we all are as we move through the different age categories of our working careers. And the single most important thing to do is to have the conversation. Don't let it linger that there's some sort of resentment that might be there. And so right up front, you want to talk about the age difference, perhaps, if that's a concern to you, and have that one-on-one. What I have found, the thing that causes the most friction is styles of communication. So whereas somebody who's been in the workplace for a long time might be very adept at picking up the phone or walking around the corner to the next office when we're back in the office, and having that conversation, where somebody who is younger might prefer sending out a quick text message and just quickly getting an answer to something without having a more involved thing. So often it can come across, as we know, in emails and text communications, things can be misunderstood. They can come off as kind of cryptic and short and maybe offensive in some way. So communication, I think, is the number one thing. And remember, for the older individual, that the younger boss, what is in that position for a reason. So it comes down to respect, and you have to respect the fact that they are in that position because they are talented and they are good. And conversely, they need to respect you. That's why I think it's really important to have this age conversation early on in a relationship.
That is, yeah, the communication angle is so true. And I've experienced this myself. I come from a generation in written communications. We write incomplete sentences that end with a period at the end. That's the demarcation of an end of the sentence. And in this new texting environment, to have a short text that ends with a period, I had no idea that the younger generation takes that as this sort of, I've been given feedback. Oh, are you mad? I'm like, what do you mean? and it's something so simple and so easily addressed. To have a conversation about communications just is really important, and such an easy thing to address. Just opening up lines of communication, easy and hard.
It's critical. And one other thing, Catherine, I wanted to say about the misconceptions of someone who's more experienced as someone to hire is that there's this feeling that they're not willing to learn new ways of doing things, that they're kind of set in their ways. And that is something that is really not true. And the efforts that are going on in Colorado right now are so encouraging to me. This whole idea of the focus on retraining, reskilling, education, matching up what the employer needs, what an employee needs to tack on to their own in their quiver so that they have that ready to go. And so this communication of what skills are needed and how you can prepare for those and brush up what you currently have to redeploy. And so older workers definitely are up for changing the way they do things. And that is something that has to be a myth that has to be dispelled.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I loved Joe's comments and Lee's comments. Our working careers span 20 or 30 or even 40 or more years. To think that we can graduate from high school or college with the exact same skills that are going to carry us for decades probably never was realistic in the first place and is unrealistic now. And have the awareness, the importance of lifelong learning and reskilling, upskilling, transferable skills. And it is just, it's so amazing to hear what they're doing in Colorado to really connect the dots between this opportunity, employers, and the workforce. So, one thing we haven't talked about yet, and this is something that we see a lot in our research at Transamerica Institute, and we see it a lot in your work as well, is how retirement has changed. And this may seem counterintuitive to our audience, work and retirement, because for decades before us, the two ideas were mutually exclusive. And today, people envision working beyond age 65, and the idea of retirement is something very personal, very flexible, more of a phased basis. So not going full blast one day and never working again the next, but staying active and involved. And of course, we know that people can only really be successful if employers have business practices in place to support phased retirement, and we know that they don't, not yet anyway. So I would love to get your thoughts on that, both from somebody who's looking to extend their working lives and transition, and your food for thought or recommendations for employers.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, Catherine. It's absolutely huge because as we're living, longer, presumably healthier lives, there is this need to continue to earn longer than a generation prior to us. This we've never been here before. This is a fact. And so the people I meet with around the country are, they're looking to continue working beyond retirement. Um, in a way that not necessarily pedal to the metal as they were before, but they want to do it. Even people who have saved adequately for retirement are saying, I want to keep working as a safety net because we don't know what our health costs are going to be at the end of life. We don't know a lot of these. Look at what we've just been through with the pandemic. My goodness, everyone has a wake up call right there about health issues. So what's happened is people want to keep working to continue to earn, to put, not dip into retirement accounts, to delay Social Security, and all of those great things. And then all these great health benefits, the mental energy you get from continuing to work, and the physical benefits of continuing to work. So these are great from an employee standpoint. And so you have this eager workforce that wants to, but yes, they're looking for opportunities. The ones I talk to a lot, it's different at 55 and 65. Okay. These are different challenges and different goals, perhaps. But somebody is looking for maybe to have more autonomy, to have that flexible schedule, to be able to dip in and out in contract positions. And that is a trend coming out of the pandemic, but as well as being able to do phased retirement. And this is something that I know in your studies with Transamerica has found that a lot of employees say, hey, this is what we want. But their employers don't offer it, or they think that their employers think that they're sensitive to this idea. They know their workers want to stay on the job longer, but the workers say, no, they don't get it. They don't appreciate us here. So they're not looking for these flexible opportunities for their workplace. And I think one stumbling block for offering phased retirement is that it can be expensive, and it might be something they don't want to offer to all employees. So these opportunities tend to be cherry picked. It's individual employees get these opportunities. Depends on the field, but that tends to be what's happening. So I'm not sure we're going to see a global movement with companies saying, oh, we're now going to offer everyone phased retirement. But it is something that an employee can think about, and an employer should also be working for ways to encourage this sort of gradual step down, because everyone benefits. And you also get the opportunity of mentorship, which we haven't talked about yet, that allows that older worker to help train the younger person coming along behind them so that it's a seamless transition.
Very good. And one thought on phased retirement that we've seen in our research, and we're looking at the baby boomer generation is not getting any younger. The oldest boomers are now entering their mid 70s, and many, if work and retirement are mutually exclusive, many employers may find that they lose their baby boomer workers, not because they have to choose one or the other. And if they had an option, they may be able to retain those employees a bit longer for things like mentoring and succession planning, which you just described. And I think it's also important to recognize that phased retirement, there is no cookie cutter or standard phased retirement offering. It's something for employers to consider. Now, what could they do to help retain valuable workers and effect a more seamless transition based on their own company's needs and circumstances? Of course, this requires working with advisors and with counsel on how to accomplish it, but there are some tremendous, I believe there's some tremendous opportunities associated with that. You mentioned the pandemic. Well, I think that's a good place where in our last couple of minutes to talk about to say that the pandemic has disrupted the workforce is a complete understatement. And as many hardships and really extremely difficult circumstances have come out of the pandemic, there's also been some silver linings. and particularly as it relates to opportunities or potential opportunities for experienced employees or older workers. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that have kind of bubbled up in the last year, and one of the big ones, and there's two sides to it, of course. But guess what? Remote work is, it's the genie's out of the bottle. This is here to stay. I think in prior to the pandemic, younger workers were asking for this. I mean, there were some companies that were very much along in the thinking of how to make this work for their organization. During the last year, I think companies realized that workers really can work from home. They can, or remotely. They are productive. Their performance numbers are great. They figured out how to do it and how to make it work for them. And guess what? It saves money. It can be a huge cost savings to an employer. The good thing about this for older workers is that it goes a long way to fighting ageism. I honestly think when you're working remotely, you are not judged by those subliminal things of what you look like, or compared to somebody younger at the cubicle or the desk next to you. Or it is something that you are judged by your performance and your productivity, and it's not that ageism sort of stereotype doesn't sort of come up. In addition, if the older worker has any health concerns or restrictions of some kind, being able to work remotely allows you to stay on the job and use your talents in a way that if you had to commute to an office, or if the office wasn't set up for sort of the physical demands that might need to be adjusted for someone who has aging issues, then this can be a real win. So that's a big thing. I also see, and this is kind of related to it, Catherine, is a surge in contract positions. And so this is not necessarily a great thing for older workers, because it means that you often would lose some of the benefits that you would get as a full-time employee. But for an employer, it can be very cost effective. And it also, the positive for the older worker is there are more opportunities. It keeps you on the job in a flexible manner, which many are looking for at this stage. So it could be a short-term project, 3-6 months. It could be seasonal, dipping in and out like that, consulting. So there's all kinds of great websites that are coming up now where you can find these kinds of remote offerings. And I think flexjobs.com, which is actually based there in Colorado, is one of my favorites for finding these kind of positions. And older workers, I've talked to many who have actually found opportunities through these kinds of listings.
Well, fantastic. And I hope all the employers and workers out there are hearing this. Change brings opportunity. And you have beautifully outlined what these new opportunities are. One final question for you, boy, our time has flown, is what are the big takeaways that you want to impart on our employer audience today?
Oh my gosh, this is what has to happen. It is imperative that you look around your workplace and say, how can I make this happen? How can I benefit from this aging population, this experienced worker? Because this is moving. If you put these policies in place today, it is going to benefit you as the different generations. It's decades to come, as we heard earlier. This isn't just for today. And so it is important to sort of start addressing some of these key issues but look at it, turn it, how is this going to benefit your company? How can you make this happen? And you need to look at some of the things in how you go about retaining this workforce. And it's not giving lip service to, oh yes, we don't, we're not ageist. It isn't something that we're concerned about, because it is there, it lingers, it is seriously embedded in our cultures. And so I think you need to look at the way you pay experienced workers, how you promote them, how you work to retain them. What positive imagery do you use in your retention, and how you seek out new workers? What do your materials look like, and your website and your social media presence, to make it seem inviting that you are open to a multi-generational workers? Because we're not just saying, hey, let's bring on the older workers. Let's bring on the older and the younger workers. So we have these amazing teams working together to make your company the most creative and productive and forward thinking it can be.
Well, thank you, Kerry. I think that is the perfect note to end this on. And one last question is, well, I'll answer it. Kerry, where can people learn more about your work?
Oh, thank you so much. My website is great, kerryhannon.com, KerryHannon.com. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, wherever. Reach out. I'd love to chat with anyone who's interested in furthering the conversation.